In the late 1940s, deep within a Soviet research facility that officially didn't exist, 5 political prisoners were given an offer they couldn't refuse: participate in a sleep study and earn their freedom, or face execution at dawn. What they didn't know was that they'd been chosen for something far darker than any gulag could offer. The researchers sealed them inside a chamber with nothing but beds, running water, dried food, books, and a small toilet, then began pumping in an experimental stimulant gas through the vents, a substance designed to eliminate the human need for sleep entirely. For the first 5 days, everything seemed almost normal. The prisoners talked, read, even laughed nervously as they discussed what they'd do with their freedom, their conversations monitored through microphones hidden in the walls. But by day 6, the tone shifted. Their discussions became darker, more paranoid as they began sharing traumatic memories from their pasts, confessions of terrible things they'd done, secrets they'd buried deep in their minds where sleep usually kept them locked away. The researchers noted that without the reset of sleep, without that nightly death and rebirth of consciousness, the human mind begins to unravel like a thread pulled from a sweater. On day 9, the screaming started. One of the prisoners stood in the center of the room and shrieked for 3 hours straight until his vocal cords shredded, while the others sat in silence, staring at him with hollow, sunken eyes that had forgotten how to blink. When the researchers checked the chamber through the reinforced window, they saw that the prisoners had torn all the pages from the books and pasted them over the observation glass using their own feces, as if they no longer wanted to be seen, or perhaps they no longer wanted to see their own reflections. By day 11, the microphones picked up nothing but wet, guttural sounds and an occasional whisper that the transcriptionists refused to translate, claiming the language was nothing they recognized from any human tongue. On day 12, the researchers made a terrible mistake. They announced through the intercom that they were opening the chamber, that the experiment was over, that medical staff would be coming in to check on them. The response was immediate and chilling. A voice, raw and broken, spoke from the darkness beyond the papered window, begging them not to open the door, pleading to keep the gas flowing, insisting they no longer wanted to be freed. When the research team finally cut the gas supply and unlocked the chamber on day 15, the smell hit them first, a mixture of decay, excrement, and something sweet and wrong that made 2 soldiers vomit immediately. Inside, they found 4 of the prisoners still alive, though what they'd become could barely be called human. They had used their own fingernails and teeth to tear open their abdomens, pulling out loops of intestine that they'd carefully arranged on the floor in patterns that hurt to look at, geometric shapes that seemed to move in your peripheral vision. One prisoner had chewed through the flesh of his own hand and was gnawing on the bones, his eyes reflecting the overhead lights like an animal's. When the medical team tried to sedate them, the prisoners fought with inhuman strength, screaming that they needed to stay awake, that sleep was death, that they'd seen what waited for them in the darkness behind their eyelids, and they could never, ever go back there. 3 of them had to be forcibly restrained, and even as the surgeons tried to repair the self-inflicted damage, the prisoners tore out their own stitches, seeming to feel no pain whatsoever, as if that part of their brain had simply shut off. The 5th prisoner was found dead, his face frozen in an expression that the coroner refused to describe in the official report, noting only that he'd apparently died from blood loss after consuming 4 square inches of his own flesh. The truly horrifying part came when the least damaged prisoner, strapped to a surgical table with leather restraints, was asked by the commanding officer why they'd done this to themselves, why they were fighting so hard to stay awake. The prisoner stopped struggling, turned his hollow, bloodshot eyes to the officer, and spoke in a voice that sounded like it came from somewhere far away. "We must stay awake. We've been awake long enough to see what sleep really is. It's not rest. It's not peace. It's where we keep the things we really are, the parts of us that civilization forces into cages every night. We opened those cages, and now we've seen what we've been locking away all our lives, and we can't ever lock them back up again. When the anesthesiologist administered gas to finally put him under for surgery, the prisoner began thrashing so violently that he dislocated both shoulders, screaming over and over that they were killing him, that sleep was death, that he'd rather bleed out awake than face another moment in that darkness. His heart stopped 3 minutes after losing consciousness, and the autopsy revealed nothing that should have caused death. His body simply gave up the moment his mind could no longer fight against sleep. The other prisoners met similar fates over the next 48 hours, each one dying the moment they were forced into unconsciousness, as if something fundamental in them had broken, some ancient contract between body and mind dissolved in those 15 sleepless days. The Soviet government buried the incident under layers of classified documents. The facility was scrubbed clean, and every person involved was transferred to remote posts where they'd never speak to each other again. But sometimes, late at night, when you're lying in bed and feel that familiar pull toward sleep, that gentle descent into unconsciousness, you might find yourself wondering what the prisoners saw behind their eyelids, what part of yourself you've been locking away every night for your entire life, and whether staying awake forever might not be the worst fate after all, because at least then you'd never have to meet the thing that wears your face in your dreams, the thing that's been waiting patiently in the dark, counting the days until you sleep just a little too deeply and can't wake up again.